most of the supplies in there, supplying all of the arms and the technology, and even had some Chinese troops in Vietnam. And we gave them a seat on the UN, ousting Taiwan, with a seat on the Security Council. You know, when the UN was formed, they gave the Soviet Union 3 seats on the Security Council with veto power. Why would you do that? Because you're globalist, and you want to use communists to create conflict and to make the UN ineffective. Why do they want the UN to be ineffective? So eventually, another war will give a call for a UN with teeth. You see, and that's where we're headed. The globalists have been funding. Remember, they built the Bolsheviks, they brought them to power, they armed the Soviet Union, they made them a nuclear power, they brought Mao Zedong to power, and they've allowed China to steal technology for years. And then another Republican, Newt Gingrich, who convinced America in his contract with America to make him Speaker of the House, what was his first act of Congress as Speaker? To give Red China most favored trading status. And then eventually to get them into the World Trade Organization. So that what? We could give them all of our business. And this had two purposes. One, the United States was inflating the currency at about the rate of about 10%, saying it was 1 to 2%. They always fudge the CPI because we do have one form of indexing in the U.S., and that's the Social Security cost of living allowance. COLA. How many are you on Social Security? 2 years ago, when you had high inflation, did you get a COLA? Cost of living allowance? No. They said no, there was no inflation. Oh, it's incredible. They finally gave us a COLA. Last year, when it was 15% of inflation, they gave us a 3% increase. That's because the CPI is always understated by about 3 times in order to not have hyperinflation. Our government knows what indexing does, but Social Security is the only indexing, and that's why they fudge the numbers on that. So Newt Gingrich gave us these things, and this is what has built Red China. We have given them money to be able to buy all those goods, and of course one of the conditions of doing business with China, you have to give them all of your technology, but that wasn't all. Our Commerce Department has been controlled by the globalists ever since the Ronald Reagan administration. It was during the Reagan administration we gave away a ton of military technology, dual-use technology, that the Commerce Department approved and said, yeah, it's okay because China is an ally now so that we don't have to restrict the technology to China. It was during the Reagan administration that Hughes Aircraft, and I had a subscriber that was part of Hughes Aircraft, and he complained to me, he said, you know, we got the Chinese running all over the place, looking over our shoulders. I said, well, have you protested to management? And he wrote back a week later and said, yeah, we protested and we threatened to strike if they didn't throw the Chinese out. What did the management do? They kicked us out on Saturdays and let the Chinese have the run of the entire plant. That was what is happening during the Reagan administration. Now, did Reagan do that? No. Did he know that? No. But Ronald Reagan made a severe compromise in order to become president. He beat George H.W. Bush for the president for the nomination. And then the 3 heads of the media came to him, CBS, ABC, and NBC, and says, you know, Mr. President nominee, we can either look with favor on your presidency or we can destroy you in the media. We would look with favor if you took George H.W. Bush as your vice president and let him control personnel in the White House. And Reagan agreed to that. And he still fought that all the time, and that's why they tried to assassinate him. And after they assassinated him, he became much more compliant. In fact, he and Nancy turned to Gene Dixon, another spiritualist, to try to get some kind of spiritual protection because of the assassination. But the Reagan White House was full of homosexuals during that time, brought in by George H.W. Bush.